Welcome everyone. Very happy to have you join us today for today's webinar on open network expert guidance. Before we jump into the main body of the copy content for today, I am going to just briefly, we're just going to introduce ourselves. Mike, do you want to go first?
Sure thing. Good to see you as always, Claire. My name is Michael Harbaugh. I'm the Director of Education Partnerships at Handshake. Been here around 6 years and helped lead kind of the growth that we've had in our network, both in the US and UK, based out here in London. And yeah, really looking forward to chatting today.
Excellent. And I am Claire Allens. I'm Head of Education Strategy. I've been at Handshake for 2.5 years now. I'm working obviously in the UK team. I'm working with lots of our university partners. So really happy to be here today talking about this open network expert guidance work. So during today's webinar, we are going to dig a little bit deeper into Handshake's vision to essentially embed career service expertise more deeply into the student experience, all while helping your students access more opportunities as well. And we're going to do this across the agenda, which is shown here on the screen. Firstly, I'm going to reintroduce the Handshake mission for those of you that don't know, and talk a little bit about the vision for this open network expert guidance work. I'm then going to hand over to Mike, who's going to talk a little bit about the current backdrop and essentially the why behind most of this work, and also the when, so the timeline for a lot of this work, the sort of top line timeline. We are then going to open it up for questions from you, as well as answer some important questions that we think are sort of critical when we think about this open network expert guidance work. And then we're going to dive into some of the finer details of some of the upcoming product updates that you will see, and share some insights around the sort of later stages of this work as well through the future vision section. And then finally, we will open it up to you again for questions. And as always, no questions are off limits. For anyone who's been to any of our partner meetings or had demos or one-to-ones with us, you know that we love questions. No questions are ever off limits, as long as it relates to Handshake, obviously. So please do feel free to ask us any questions that come into your mind. We're always happy to answer them. So let's get started. So first things first, I'm conscious that we probably have quite a mix of attendees here today, some existing partners, some potential future partners, who knows? And I'm sure we will also have a variety of colleagues who will be watching this session after today. So did just want to reintroduce the Handshake mission, as it's what's guiding a lot of this work. So Handshake's mission has always been to democratize opportunity. It is the objective that drives everything that we do, including this particular work. It is why Handshake, the Handshake network exists. It is why we will never charge an employer to post a job. It is why any student with an ac.uk email address can access the Handshake network, whether their university is a formal partner with us or not. Handshake's mission to democratize access to opportunity covers everything and supporting everyone to find that first job, but also it's about developing the connections and the information that every student needs to form a really meaningful career for them. So we're talking about access to information through employer profiles, alumni profiles, employer reviews, job reviews, that kind of thing. We're talking about opportunity to access advice from careers professionals, from employers, from alumni, from students' peers as well. But we're also talking about opportunities for students to form connections, to network and to build social capital with no previous connections required. Our intention is always to continue to open up the Handshake network to ensure that your students have the greatest access to opportunity, whether it's job profiles, information, or connections. And that is what drives everything that we do. Our vision for open network expert guidance is to increase your students' access to information about employers and the diverse roles available to them by shifting the burden of vetting employer legitimacy to Handshake, and then building new ways for you to utilize your expertise and knowledge of the students and employers that you work with to further personalize their experience, to essentially have an open but curated student experience. And we're bringing this this vision to life, through with our partners in step with us, through one-to-one conversations, through partner meetings, through advisory boards, and we'll continue to work in this way as much of this work kind of stretches into 2023 and far beyond as well. On screen here, you will see an overview of the vision, but also a link to a document that we released earlier in the year, which details lots of the stuff we're talking about today at a sort of top level. So I will make sure that gets sent out to attendees after today as well, if you want to dig a little bit deeper, as well as the recording of today. Before we go too far into the future, though, and the vision and the mission and everything else, I'm going to pause and just hand over to Mike, who's going to talk a little bit about the sort of current state of play today and why we think this work matters today more than ever.
Thanks, Claire. Hopefully this can give a little bit of context on, really, as Claire mentioned at the top, the why of these decisions and this vision that we've created. And then I'll dig into briefly a little bit of that timeline, just because I know the what and the when is also a very always top of mind concern for everybody. So I think just to set the stage a bit, there are really three main themes that we see when we look at the state of higher education today that are all kind of like pushing us towards evolving and iterating on this network to hopefully future-proof the partners that we serve. This is going to be a surprise to no one that resources are tight and that the world of finances in UK higher education is in a state of flux. It's in a state of uncertainty. Combined with that, when we look at the changes in the labor market and inflation kind of hitting everyone's pocketbook, it's creating not just challenges in the budgets that many of our partners have to work with to serve their students, but also in the staff that they're able to hire. We hear that finding great talent and retaining great talent in the career service is increasingly a huge challenge. When we combine that with all of the changes that have hit some of our students so hard during and now after the pandemic, we're left in this place where there's a lot of uncertainty and there's maybe lots more information out there for students as they look at their career, but not necessarily all of the structure that they need. An example of this, students tell us almost 2/3 of them say they do not need to meet someone in person to make a professional connection. At the same time, remote is the top keyword search that we saw last year on Handshake. But all of that happens at the same time that students really tell us that they've never felt more uncertain about how they're going to complete their job search and start their career. So in the face of all of these challenges, what we've seen is we need to continue to think ahead about how does the Handshake network have to change so that we can win the competition for student engagement and for student attention. So moving forward one slide, if we think about that kind of landscape of student attention, it's a daunting one. Students have never had more information than they do today. The core challenge of the current moment is not how do we get students access just to jobs. Those are often already available on the internet in places like LinkedIn or Google. It's really how do we help guide them so they actually understand what's out there and can actually find the right options. One member of our Careers 2032 roundtables, which many of you might have been a part of, said this perfectly. They said the problem is that students are so information overloaded, it's hard for us in the career service to even know how to reach them. So when we think about that, we know that students actually go to Google first for a job search before they even go to the career service. And that's because they know that Google today is where the jobs are. So for us, part of our vision as we invest in our network and invest in this platform is to make sure that your office and your tools remain the first port of call for students. If the resources that the career service are able to offer are compelling and relevant and curated, that's how we're going to make sure that you are central and valuable for every single student. So if that helps paint the picture of why we're evolving the network, I hope that's helpful. If not, hopefully some of the timeline and details I'm about to share will help bring this to life a little bit more. So I want to move on from background and then really talk more about the what and the when. And this is something that I'll outline, and then I'm going to pass it back to Claire, and she's going to add even more context and kind of detail onto this. Definitely just trying to over communicate with everybody because we know this is a lot of information to take in. So first and foremost, when we think about our timeline, and Claire, you can just, I think, keep clicking through these. We have different phases of our vision for evolving the network. And I thought I would just show them on screen all here at once, even though that was a build, just because it's helpful to kind of see them mapped out in one place. The first stage is really around signal boosting, which is to say, we want to empower our career services partners with more tools to be able to help students find the employers and the opportunities that are best for them. Maybe that's best for them individually, by their course, by their college. There's lots of different ways we can slice that. We want to start there because it's important that as we develop the network, the tools that allow you to sit at the hub of that network have to come first. That work is already underway. Many of you have seen that already with employer collections in your system. The next piece, which is actually happening in the background right now, is we want to broaden access to opportunities by helping more employers get access to more institutions across the network. What that means is we need to allow employers to find new university partners. We have to ensure that they can do it safely. So what we're doing right now into this fall and winter is developing tools to validate employers and actually get ready to deprecate the trust score out of Handshake. Claire is going to talk a lot about why, because if that sounds like a loss of functionality, and if it sounds like something that's scary, it's actually going to be a win, and it's going to help us address some major challenges that have developed in Handshake. And especially it's going to be one that provides a lot more equity for SMEs and SMBs in the system. So I'm very excited about that one. And lastly, we're looking forward to a future where we can completely flip the model and not have to have our career services partners spend so much time and energy on employer approval workflows that are often pretty duplicative across institution, but move to a place where we actually curate employers out, thus saving time and hopefully freeing up a lot of bandwidth for other more impactful activities. So just to recap, starting with signal boosting, many of you have seen that now, and I'm going to talk in a second about what more is to come there. Really diving into how we ensure trust and safety in the network with employer validation, and then flipping the model away from approving every single employer individually to having preset curation filters and basically saying not who gets to come in, but who do I need to make sure doesn't. Just to dive in on some of these tools a bit more, I want to reiterate, when we look at this timeline, there's a long future here. And we're going to be iterative, and we're going to be asking for lots of feedback throughout this process. So where are we now? Where we are right now is looking at employer curation and employer validation. That means helping our partners develop content collections of employers who are, say, a great fit for local opportunities. It means we're working to partner with an external firm to really double down on trust and safety in the system and allowing for more vetting of employers than ever before. The next quick win phases of this process are going to be more customization and more kind of like configuration of those employer tools, and lots of feedback and iteration from you. I always like to say that slow is smooth, smooth is fast. We do these types of rollouts and these types of product builds over time because we need to get tons of information back from you about what's working, what more you need, and what we need to pause and revisit. So lots more to come in the employer curation. In the employer validation, continuing to develop more tools for you to filter jobs as they come through the door into your system, continuing to look at the data to understand where we can get quick wins and improve trust and safety. I put 2023 and then into like farther 2023. I could have put 2025, but it's a little scary for people to consider that. But really, these next steps that happen afterwards, they're going to happen throughout that next year. They're going to happen well into the future. This is a long-term vision for our platform. We see a future where not only curating and boosting the signal of individual employers, but really being able to do that for jobs is also an integral part of your work. That means tagging specific opportunities or types of opportunities for specific students, having better and better tools to integrate that into your email outreach, even one-to-one matchmaking. When we think to the future of how do we vet jobs and open the door for more opportunities into our system, that means opening so that trusted roles are visible throughout the network. It means allowing you to tap into and boost certain opportunities in our algorithm. And as always, in this entire process, lots of feedback, lots of iterative design with our partners. That's always been a hallmark of what we do. So really the moral of this slide, so to speak, is really that this is a process that we're just beginning. And it's one that we see as kind of a really important long-term bet for how we're going to create more value for our career service partners. So I'm going to pause there and hand it back over to Claire.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. So as Mike kind of alluded to, in the interest of transparency, we're sharing this vision and kind of timeline with you now. And we don't have all the answers yet, because no one's really done this before. So we're doing this with you, in partnership with you. But just because it's not been done before doesn't mean it's not possible. So, but we're also aware that unknowns and kind of longer term vision sort of work can be quite scary. It can also be exciting as well, we hope. So we want to sort of encourage you to openly ask us any questions that you might have. So if you want to pop them in the Q&A, we'll be able, me and myself and Mike will be able to see those, and we'll be able to answer those in the next sort of in this section. But we also want to pause and also answer some questions here that we think are important to answer and just deal with upfront, in a very sort of upfront way. So firstly, one of the questions is, will I lose all control over the employers and jobs that my students see? So the simple answer to this question is, if any of you are thinking that in the back of your mind, I'm sure some of you might be, the simple answer to this question is no. University partners will still be able to decline employers at their institution. And as we sort of alluded to, Handshake will be providing university partners with new tools and tags that allow you to identify and block employers for moral, ethical, or legal reasons. And these employer tags will be powered by the decline reasons that you already see in product today, and obviously represent, incredibly legitimate reasons for each institution choosing to, perhaps not work with a particular employer or not want them to engage with your students. So we would still very much there will still be ways for you to do that. In addition to being able to decline employers for those reasons, alongside the new enhanced sort of validation process and trust and safety processes, which we'll go into more detail in shortly, university and student users will always be able to flag any employers or users that elicit any form of concern. If you see anything or a student sees anything, they can still flag them, and that will get picked up by our trust and safety process, trust and safety team. That process is not going anywhere. It's been there for a long time, but we are just building on it and making the trust and safety processes that sit alongside it even more comprehensive. And we'll talk a little bit about that. One of the other questions that I think comes up, Mike, do you want to chat about this one?
Yeah, really, we hear this one all the time, especially from the employee relations teams that we're working with, is how will we protect those special relationships that we have with employers in a broader, more open network? And I actually really like this question, because I think that what we're building here is really an amazing opportunity and not really a threat at all to this type of mindset. We've always wanted to ensure that our network is one that we can leverage to support the employer relations work that every one of our partners does. And I personally am really excited that this broader network is really only going to empower that. So first, I want to share a couple details I think are important. As we broaden the network, employers are still going to be able to prioritize and preference the institutions they want to recruit from. They're going to be able to sort, filter, and preference candidates based on the fact that they're from your institution. That's something they can do today. It's not going anywhere. It's also important to remember that the individual contacts, connections, conversations that you're having with employers are still proprietary to you. None of that is ever shared. It's not that we're going to be taking that context and publishing it to the broader network in any way. So how are we going to really enable and deepen the relationships you already have is the big question. When we think about all the expert curation tools that we're going to be able to build and improve on, allowing you to boost employers to your students, boost their specific jobs into curated sets, into email campaigns, and really even getting there and tweaking to say, we know this opportunity is perfect for this particular set of students. Let's make sure it shows up front and center. That's all a lot of exciting nuance that's added to the boosting that we're already doing and the work you already do with your employers every day when it comes to events, careers fairs, et cetera. So really opening the network more for us is a way to deepen that special relationship and provide a lot more nuance to it. It's not about removing it at all. And we're very confident that this is going to be an exciting future here.
Excellent. One more question before we open it over to you. Is Handshake trying to cut career services out of this early talent ecosystem? We tend to hear this question when there is a comparison between the Handshake network and perhaps standalone career management tools or systems that already exist. As we sort of alluded to in that kind of messy diagram earlier that Mike showed, the digital talent sort of early sort of ecosystem is already made up of multiple non-university owned sort of digital platforms, whether it's LinkedIn, Indeed, Google, that kind of things, that you know, careers professionals have no or limited access to. And actually at Handshake, we believe that career services are actually critical for the health of that early talent ecosystem. And actually by opening up the Handshake network, we'll actually enable career services and professionals to be at the heart of that ecosystem where they should be, to really support that student and employer experience by providing deeper engagement insights, by giving you access to that kind of that wider ecosystem, and new ways for careers professionals to utilize those expertise to support students and employers. And to be very honest with you as well, you know, our partnerships with universities, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on as well, education providers and careers professionals is our key differentiator as a business. And we continue to invest heavily in education success, engineering, product and design teams on that university side of the business. So cutting career services out in any way, shape or form at Handshake would just not make sense for us at all. So the simple answer to this question, if you ever hear this question, we sometimes hear it, is no. And in fact, the opposite is actually true. We firmly believe, you know, putting career services and professionals in the heart of the ecosystem is what makes it successful. And quite frankly, it is what differentiates Handshake from other systems that exist. So those are our three kind of important questions that we just wanted to deal with. There is one question in the Q&A that I do just want to pick up, which is around the fact that says we don't allow unpaid internships. How will this be managed going forward? Essentially, in the short term, nothing's going to change. Longer term, as Mike kind of alluded to, we will be bringing in sort of flipping approvals for jobs in the same way that we're doing for employers. So institutions will be able to review and decline jobs for exactly the same kind of reasons, moral, ethical, legal reasons, using these kind of smart filters that we're building out for on the employer side over the coming months. This work will not be the sort of job approval flipping won't happen until later, much later in 2023, and we will continue to work with university partners to iterate on that. But essentially, if you don't allow unpaid internships at your institution, there will still be ways to decline those at your institutions in the future. So we've got time at the end for more questions, so we'll pick up others then. So please do pop them in the Q&A if you have any. But what we wanted to do was spend some time also talking about how this will come to life in product and show you, for those of you that haven't been involved in any of the beta testing, what this is going to look like. So firstly, I'm very happy to talk a little bit more about the signal boosting via employer connections. This feature was developed with input from our partners and launched in a closed beta just over a month ago. But as Mike mentioned, we're planning to roll this out to all of our partners later this summer. Before we jump in, I should say a huge thank you to all of our partners who were involved in the discussions, but also the beta participants as well. Without your collaboration and feedback, we couldn't bring this kind of product development to life. So huge thank you to all of you who took part in that. So for a bit of context, signal boosting has really been built with the intention of more deeply embedding career service expertise into Handshake. Handshake believes firmly that your knowledge is, again, as we sort of alluded to, is what differentiates the Handshake from experience from other jobs boards, networks or career management tools. So this, and this has actually been validated with students as well. A recent round of research that we undertook with students found that 98% of the students we surveyed would be really interested in recommendations on jobs and employers from their career service teams. So this initial version of signal boosting allows you to highlight employers with uniquely compelling traits to your students. And we'll talk a little bit about how that works. So firstly, this shot in the middle is the new employer summary side sheet. So this sheet will appear when you click on an employer from the employer page in product. It aggregates data like location, job roles, engagement at fairs or events, student followers, the number of students who might have followed that employer, messages sent, alumni events, that kind of thing, and helps you to gauge how engaged that employer is with your institution. We know that from some partners that we've spoken to, many of you will already have clear ideas about which employers you want to put into or boost into these collections, but we're hoping that this new side sheet will also give your teams and you an easy way to get that engagement data and know how to sort of which ones to boost in particular collections. So after you see the summary sheet, after you click on add to collection, you'll be prompted to add an employer to one of the collections you see here. And this list represents the most popular reasons that your students might be interested in a particular employer. And this again was developed with input from partners. So we have close to campus, hidden gem, popular with alumni, hires from our institution, invests in diversity, hires international students, sure that one will be very popular, great for internships and placements, and great for college with then the ability for you to link that to a particular faculty or school or however you have that set up in your Handshake instance. You'll be able to add 50 employers to each collection at any given time. And additionally, we plan to add more collections, more collection categories in the future in future updates, but these are the ones that we're going live with for the beta and the rollout over the summer. Switching to the student experience, we've revamped the Career Centre page to feature your recommendations. So this page will serve as the sort of employer collections hub. It's an easy location to point students to find your recommendations. And we also chose this page. It is one of the most visited pages within Handshake. And we plan to experiment further in the autumn around how else we will surface signal boosted employers throughout the student experience on places like the homepage, on the job search, event search, perhaps in emails, that kind of thing. So you'll see more experimentation throughout the autumn with students to understand how this content makes most sense for them to be surfaced to them. If a student clicks into one of the collections, this is what they will see. This page not only allows students to see what employers you've boosted, but they can also see the other categories as well on the left-hand side that they can navigate to. From this page, they can also then easily follow an employer or click through to see their jobs and opportunities, their profile, the students that have gone on to work for that employer, that kind of thing. And when a student views a collection, they will see employers ordered by what the relevancy that's most relevant to them based on their activity and their interest. So this is how we're bringing together your expertise and knowledge with the sort of algorithms that already sit behind the scenes in Handshake as well. So just want to talk a little bit about how the beta itself performed. So let's have a look at the sort of institution side of things. We had 162 partners participate in the beta, and they've been very active, or they were very active in the first month. They added over 4,000 employers to collections in the first month, with the most popular collections being close to campus, which was then closely followed by hired from our institution and great for college. And when it comes to what kind of employers that we are seeing your teams most frequently boost, they're coming from the healthcare industry, internet and software, and also nonprofits as well. So that's the kind of initial data that we're seeing, but we've seen quite a lot of change. We saw quite a lot of change throughout the first month and will continue to, but we're monitoring how these collections are being used by your teams. Also just wanted to touch upon how students have been engaging on the student side with the beta. So we saw 18,000 views of that recommendations page in the first month. And in this bar graph, you can see the click rate on boosted employers once students were on that page. To give you some context, the content and Handshake across Handshake typically get somewhere between 1 to 7% of a click-through rate. So these click-through rates are really, really positive and shows a real desire from students to engage with this content, which we think is really positive. As you can see from the bar graph here, the collections that were most frequently engaged with were great for college, hidden gems, and great for internships. But we did again see this data fluctuate in that first month. So we are going to continue to monitor this as well. We also found that great for college, hidden gems, and internships and placements also got great click-through rates for then students then following those employers, as well as employers with an alumni presence as well. So by students then going through and following that employer, they're going to be kept up to date to when that employer then comes on campus or they're promoting a job next. So really driving that continuous engagement with employers, but also with you and your service. So as mentioned, we'll be rolling this out to all partners over the summer, so keep an eye out for that. But as we sort of alluded to, this kind of signal boosting for employers is really the first step in a much broader signal boosting strategy, where we want to allow you and your teams to boost not just employers, but jobs and events and other content across Handshake, bringing that kind of personalization algorithm that already exists in Handshake with your expert voice as well. So really excited to see this kind of signal boosting strategy continue to evolve. Right, next, I'm going to talk about employer validation. I'm going to try and do this very quickly as well, because there's a lot of content to get through in 5 minutes. But in short, we will be introducing a new employer validation process that replaces the trust score. Historically, the trust score has been sort of used in a way, it's been a way to crowdsource information from partners to allow partners to assess the legitimacy of an employer. But what we have seen is that trust score negatively impacts smaller businesses, as Mike kind of alluded to earlier. So what we want to do is remove the trust score and introduce an entirely new employer validation process. That means by the time an employer has even got to your kind of pending queue, they have been fully validated by us in a very extensive, new, enhanced kind of validation process. We will, going back to Mike's timeline earlier, we are working with an external partner to work on validation and enhancements to the trust and safety processes that exist in Handshake. That will go live in the back end of Handshake over the summer. And we will then, after that kind of busy season of the autumn term, we will look to replace trust score after that period of time. But we want to make you really aware that this is coming, and also let you know that in the background, the validation process will be running so that our trust and safety teams can fine tune that process as much as possible and work in partnership with you to do that as well. So employer validation, or the new employer validation process, will be powered by a new partnership that we have with a company called SIFT. SIFT is an industry leader in digital trust and safety, and through SIFT we will gain access to a suite of fraud prevention tools to detect and learn patterns unique to the Handshake ecosystem. Whilst we don't see fraud as a major issue today, we want to make sure that we have the systems and procedures in place that ensure our partners don't have to spend time looking for it, and that SIFT and we are doing that as, you know, in the best sort of leading way that we can. So the couple of different things that we will now be doing through account validation and the ongoing fraud detection features. So account creation validation, which will include multi-factor authentication, which you will be very familiar with through many of the systems that I'm sure you use. Account takeover. So SIFT will monitor logins and can trigger multi-factor auth if there's a suspicious new login, for example. Fraudulent job protection. So SIFT will monitor new job postings and look for signs of, you know, any malicious activity as well. And we'll also be using machine learning to monitor for ongoing and real-time risk assessment. So using the model to monitor for fraudulent activity, both at the point of account creation, but also throughout an employer's time on Handshake. So not just when they come into the system, but everything that they're doing on an ongoing basis. And also as well, we'll be looking at real-time message monitoring for any malicious spam as well. Something that we already do in quite a manual way within Handshake, but we're going to be doing that with in partnership with SIFT as well. So Handshake's own trust and safety team will be working with SIFT on this implementation of the validation process. And furthermore, Handshake's trust and safety team will manually review employers flagged by SIFT to make a final determination of whether an employer is allowed on the network. So looking at things like company's house, that kind of thing, if they didn't make it past the initial validation. So going back to the sort of timeline, as it were, the idea around employer validation is really to save your team as much time as possible, whilst also building sort of new automated features that will allow you to streamline that job and employer process. So these will all roll out over the summer. A new set of employer tags, which will help you to easily identify employers that you might want to decline. We'll also be launching new auto job approval rules that will allow you to more easily approve jobs as they come through. And then we will also then be replacing the trust score later in the autumn. So effectively, every employer that comes through onto Handshake will already have that 100% trust score. And this will look a little bit like that. And this is how we envisage the removal of the trust score will look later on in the year on that employer page. So instead of seeing that trust percentage, you will see whether that employer has been approved or any flags that we want to raise. I'm not going to go back over this slide, but again, this is the timeline that Mike talked through earlier. Signal boosting will roll out to everybody in the summer. Later in the autumn, we will, through that summer validation will go live, and then we will continue that throughout the autumn. And then later in the winter/autumn, we will be flipping employer approvals and removing that trust score. Mike, I'm going to hand back over to you to talk about the future beyond these product updates that I've just talked about.
I will endeavor to do so very briefly so that we can have enough time for questions if they exist, but I did want to take a second to hopefully just provide a bit more context. We've spoken about the future of job validation, job curation, and kind of that ambitious vision, but I want to add more color to that, because when we think about the future of these tools, we know there's a direct relationship between the amount of context and insight that we can pull from the network and give to our career services partners and the value that you actually have. If there's an equation here, it's information plus actionable tools equals value. And so we have to figure out, how do we really maximize that information? So when we think about the future vision for the profile in Handshake and what that means, we really see this continuum. And if we can go to the next slide there, thanks. We really see this continuum where the student profile can stay with a student from day one at university all the way through maybe when they matriculate and go into that first career. And Claire, if you could click a couple more times for me, you can bring this really snazzy build to life here. Really, we see a world where as they continue to maybe get that first role, whether they go back for more upskilling or an additional credential later in life, or just continue their career, this profile can actually just become their employer profile. It can be the profile they continue to use into early career, very similarly to the way they might use LinkedIn now. That's an ambitious vision, saying that we can be that better site, but we really think that the partnership that we have with the institutions that support learning actually is a competitive advantage for us. What this means, though, is that all that data on where users are going, what they're doing, that can come back to the Career Center and inform the work that you're doing every day. So really, it's just much more insight in addition to just whatever the HESA outcome survey has for us about where your alumni are actually going. So if we go to the next slide, really just briefly, what we see in the future in terms of how we can empower the work you're doing, it's really a lot of different facets coming together to make that vision. One are those curation tools we've talked about. And those are going to continue to improve and continue to develop with more and more nuance. Another whole aspect of this work is how do we activate alumni? Coming this autumn, you're going to see more about how we can add alumni onto events. There's a future world where Handshake has much more dramatic tools, so to speak, around how you can connect students one-to-one with alumni, have ambassadors in the system, et cetera. And really that last bit around outcomes data, as I just mentioned, we see a future where we can help you leverage this network to just get more and more information, which really is just better and better signal for you to boost the right opportunities and employers to the right students. So this is a long vision, is really just what I want to keep coming back to. This is a long process and a long kind of program that we're embarking on with you. But we're really excited about how it's going to fundamentally change and add value to the entire Handshake network. So it's very exciting, and hopefully some of that vision helps you understand kind of where we're trying to go. But I want to pause there, and just I think both Claire and I want to pause there because you've been listening to us go on in hopefully an excited way for about 40 minutes now, and ask all of you to share us any feedback, questions, context that's in your brain. And really, we want to take this opportunity to make sure you have clarity on all of these ideas. Claire, anything you'd add there?
No, I think we should allow time at the end for any questions. Please feel free to drop them in Q&A if you do have anything in particular. You got anything on your side, Mike? I can't see anything on mine.
No, but I know there was one the last time that we did this presentation with a group, which was around students feeling overwhelmed and how to prevent that. Because what we're talking about here is, the Handshake Network already does a great job of bringing dramatically more opportunities through the front door of the university. What we're talking about with this vision is really doubling down on that and having even more. So how do we do that without students having that scene that I always think of from Harry Potter when there's letters flying out of the fireplace? How do we prevent that from being a flood? I would say our relevance algorithms in our platform already do a phenomenal job of this, and that students really see the opportunities and the information that they're most interested in. As their interests change, so does what the algorithm shows them. So really what we see is a future where we can combine that algorithm and that machine learning that's already there, always running in the background, with the context and improved curation tools that exist for our career services partners. Just doubling down on that 98% statistic, that 98% of students say they are interested in getting recommendations from their career center. Today, there's so much more we can unlock there. So we see that future as one of a balance between what computer science can bring us in the form of curation, in the form of like an algorithm doing the work, with human context and human capital in the form of the Career Service Center. We think that both of those together can make sure that students have a phenomenal experience, not an overwhelming one.
Totally. I think that's really important. I think it's this idea of opening up the network, or what students can see, broadening their horizons for action if you want to go into sort of career theory space, but also creating that experience so it isn't overwhelming, and using those two pieces, the careers professional expertise, but also the digital kind of algorithms and machine learning technology that we can utilize to really curate that open network curated experience, I think is really important. So yeah. Well, with that, we're at time. We've overrun by a minute, which isn't bad for us, Mike, to be entirely honest. I feel like I rushed through quite a lot of the product stuff, so apologies. This will be shared as a recording, so you can go back through and watch it. We'll also share the Open Network Expert Guidance paper with everyone that attended today. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to either Mike, myself, or anyone of the Handshake team. You can find us, our emails are claire@joinhandshake.com, which is pretty easy. And if you have any questions, just let us know. As we said, this is very much a conversation and a partnership. So we're really excited to hear your feedback and do this work with you. So thank you very much for joining today, or listening in at a later date if you're watching the recording, and have a great day.
Bye, everyone.